Part of the reason why everything in The Lord of the Rings looked so good was down to the fact that the team would consider and debate about every specific detail.
Black Gates, what a great miniature to get to build. One of those little icons in the books that you remember so well, and drawing from both Alan Lee and John Howe's illustrations.
Alan Lee had done a wonderful rendition of the Black Gates for his illustrated version of The Lord of the Rings, and because they're quite well described by Tolkien, there seemed to be no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. And the design work I did for the Black Gates is obviously very similar to what Alan had actually drawn. The exciting bit about this period of the history of Middle-earth is that the Númenóreans have actually left so many structures which are more or less intact. The Black Gates, for example, were originally built to keep evil in Mordor, and now Sauron has turned the tables and he's fortified them for just the opposite. The only way to make these incredibly huge and heavy things open would be to have them set on some kind of wheels. And Peter at one point wanted to show that, and I really disagreed. It just seemed to me to make no sense. From a defensive point of view, you wouldn't expose a piece of important machinery like that, but had to give in anyway because he's the boss. But I was really quite pleased to see on the screen later on that the wheels have been covered again by these triangular metallic blades.
It was interesting how staying in touch with the designers influenced what you were writing. There was one occasion, though, where we realised the writing had influenced the design, and we were doing a tour of Weta Workshop, and we got to the Morannon, the Black Gate of Mordor, and I suddenly realised that there were two gates. And then they got the script out, and sure enough, there was a typo. I'd just written gates. I'd done plural. It was quite embarrassing. You know, it is described as one gate. But I think in the end, they decided that the Morannon as an entity, you know, gate, whether it was just a title, could signify, you know, two doors that open.
Here we have a kind of hobbit's eye view of the whole gate, including all this spiky orcish architecture. And this is made by step and repeat. You carve one really perfect spike, cast it, and then make many multiples to make all of these individual spikes. That way, you save a lot of manpower. It also means that you can get a repetition that looks convincing. This gate was shot at really high magnification, which is relatively rare. We normally try to not over-magnify these things because it's extremely hard to keep them in focus and it's extremely hard to detail them. But Peter wanted to do some shots where you had the effect that as if you'd basically put the camera on a tripod and put it on the bridge, which brings up another interesting problem, which is just the issue of making stuff that's close to camera read and be convincing. Now, this whole thing's built out of sheets of iron that have been hammered out by hand by the orcs. Here you can see some of the little lead plates that have been carefully burnished down to represent the iron plating, and then the little fine rows of rivet holes that have been embossed with a pounce wheel to represent the nails. This is a mechanical miniature in the sense that it has motion because the gates have to open. It's driven with a motor that lives underneath each gate that's driven and turned by the motion control. Because these are supposed to be huge, 30 times bigger in fact than we see them here, it means that everything's got to be ultra smooth. That's what this stem is sticking out the top here actually is. We discovered that although we could get smooth movement, we couldn't stay. There's just a tiny bit of play in this thing, and we had to come in above the frame and run a big bar across and stabilize it, because otherwise it'd be just a slight shimmer, which when the camera's only that far away shows up as a huge earthquake.